Playboy Hugh Hefner has died at 91. We'll examine how the Playboy philosophy transformed America. Then Ariel Davidson, Zoe Rachel, and His Eminence Paul Bois join the panel of deplorables to discuss sex, half-naked lady football players, and President Knowles. This is the Michael Knowles. You sort of think, well, Hefner probably had a lot of fun in his life. He probably had one or two fun experiences at least. And he's dying with his family and friends around him, his 26-year-old wife around him. And the thing that people are going to say about him is, man, he had a fun life. He had a good time. I bet he had a lot of fun. But when a good man dies, he's surrounded by his wife of 50 years and his memories and his children and his friends. And they say he was a good man. Maybe they even say he was a great man. And it does really put things into perspective. It shows that hanging concentrates the mind wonderfully, as they say, which actually we'll get to in a mailbag question. So we have to delve right into it because Hugh Hefner, it was a colorful character. He was a lot of fun to watch. He, depending on your point of view, destroyed America or, brought it into an age of Aquarius. But he did have the Playboy philosophy. And here is Hef explaining the Playboy philosophy to another sort of Playboy, William F. Buckley Jr.
Yes, it covers a lot of ground.
I'm not talking about whether or not you reject Cotton Mather's accretions on the Mosaic Law, but whether you reject the Mosaic Law. Do you reject, for instance, monogamy? Do you reject the notion of sexual continence before marriage? Yourself, that is to say, you as a philosopher of the new ideal of sexual liberation.
Well, I think what it really comes down to is an attempt to establish a, what's been called a new morality, and I really think that's what the American, this thing called the American sexual revolution is really all about. It's an attempt to replace the old legalism. It's certainly not a rejection of monogamy as such, but very much an attempt, in the case of premarital sex, there really hasn't been any moral code in the past except simply a thou shalt not. And
well, that's a code, isn't it?
Well, perhaps. I don't think it's a very realistic one.
It's amazing to watch those two men who come from completely different sides of the sexual revolution, the cultural revolution, and to just look at how they comport themselves. Bill Buckley is sort of smiling, he's relaxed, he's confident, he has a depth of knowledge that he's bringing out. And then you cut to young Hef, who cut a decent jib. He's a fairly good-looking guy, but his brows are furrowed. He seems nervous. He seems almost to have a sort of shame on him to be discussing the revolution that he is helping to lead. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what does the sexual revolution look like 60 years later, after Hugh Hefner ushered in this era? And the numbers don't look good. Rape rates have tripled since 1950, according to the FBI annual crime reports. In 1965, 24% of black infants were born out of wedlock. 3.1% of white infants were born out of wedlock. Today, 72% of black infants are born out of wedlock, almost 3 times, or exactly 3 times rather, and 29.4% of white infants born out of wedlock. In 1960, the divorce rate was 22%. Since 1985, the divorce rate has wavered between 40 and 50%, more than doubled. Today, more black babies are aborted than born in New York City. And porn is a $5 billion per year industry. The numbers are apparently $4 billion from in-store purchases and another $1 billion on the internet. This isn't the only way, though, to think about sex and sexuality. As Hefner says, he's reacting to Puritanism. He's reacting to prudishness. But you wouldn't call a guy like Bill Buckley exactly a prude. And here is Bill Buckley giving another sense of sensuality and sexuality.
Mr. Buckley, do you think miniskirts are in good taste?
Do I think what?
Miniskirts are in good taste.
On you, I think they are. Good legs are in good taste.
Good legs. I never would have figured you for that kind.
Don't you just love the guy? Bill Buck, I love sometimes just when I'm in the shower, I'll just be reading news headlines and I'll just say like William F. Buckley Jr. I mean, where did that guy go? Where did that culture go? Who knows? But it makes a real point, which is Bill Buckley isn't saying, go away, I hate miniskirts. Miniskirts are terrible. Any woman who wears them is going to be burned in hell forever, and we all need to wear burqas. Absolutely not. That isn't the opposite of Playboyism, of the Playboy philosophy. The answer is to make a little joke about it, to say, yeah, I like nice legs, I like miniskirts, they look really good on you. For the society, they're probably not a good sign, but if you're wearing one, that's just fine by me. It's a more human approach, and I'm not sure exactly what Hugh Hefner was reacting against as he's describing Puritanism and the Playboy philosophy. But it isn't that. He isn't reacting against traditional sexual practices and traditional sexual morality. It seems to me that these people, they think they invented sex. They think that they invented all of this, but they didn't do that. They just made it more boring. They accomplished the impossible. Playboy's subscriptions have been falling for decades. They may have been consumed in their own revolution, and they created men that aren't manly in the real sense. They might be libertine, but they're not liberated. They're not really free. It reminds me of C.S. Lewis's Men Without Chests in Abolition of Man. He says, quote, "You can't go on seeing through things forever. The whole point of seeing through something is to see something through it. To see through all things is the same as not to see." And that might be the point. Hugh Hefner says, well, the old sexual laws, they're outdated and ridiculous, and we need to get past them. Get past them to what? What is going to replace that? He says he's going to build a new morality. He didn't build a new morality. He just got rid of morality. But you can't see through things forever. And Lewis goes on, quote, "In a sort of ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ and demand the function. We make men without chests and expect of them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the geldings be fruitful." We're creating these men where when Hugh Hefner dies, I don't think a lot of people are going to say, there was a great man, there is a life well lived. We'll joke about it. We'll say, oh, he had a good life. Yeah, gosh, I wish I had that life. But we don't really mean that this is a guy who lived a life worth admiring. We won't tell our children, do what Hugh Hefner did, because he was a man without a chest. And speaking of chests, we need to get to people who certainly have chests. That would be the Lingerie Football League. Now, I think it's now called the Legend Football League or something like that. I guess that's what they say it's called now, but it's the Lingerie Football League. I actually didn't know this thing existed until this morning, and then I did a lot of research over my morning coffee. And it's this league where women wear skimpy outfits and play football, I guess. But the reason they're culturally relevant right now is that they're standing up for America while the NFL player ingrates are taking a knee. The LFL, the last bastion of hope for our country, the LFL is coming out and saying, quote, "The LFL recognizes everyone's First Amendment right to protest, but our nation's flag and anthem are far too sacred. Quote, too many fellow Americans have made the ultimate sacrifice so that our flag and anthem continue in all its majesty." Well done, ladies. A great show for America. Really appreciate you. With that, we have to bring on our panel of deplorables. I was thinking today, for this show, which is all about sex, I figured that we should do an all-female panel. They've told me absolutely not. HR simply will not be able to handle the complaints that come in. So instead, we brought on one female, Ariel Davidson. We have on Zoe Rachel and His Eminence, Paul Bois. Everybody, thank you for being here. Zoe, can you hear me, Zoe? Are you plugging your thing in? There we go. We run a real tight ship over here at the Michael Knowles Show. It was setting up during the panel. So,
considering subject matter.
Yeah, he was doing some research on the Lingerie Football League too. Now I know that you're a former Lingerie League player, and these women are really the voice of reason here. Is it time that we finally buy into the feminist notion that women should rule the world?
No, that hasn't worked out. I mean, when Adam took that advice from Eve, who wanted to assume authority at that point, and the weird thing is that Eve got her suggestion from another guy. So it kind of balances out.
That is true. It was that other guy who told, that's
It was
a great
that other
point.
guy.
So, but what does that have to do with my looking at the Lingerie Football League? This presents a real theological problem. Ariel,
Because you got to think with your head, man. It's hard to do that when you're looking at lingerie.
That is true. The blood rushes away from my brain. Ariel, between the Playboy philosophy and feminism, men have got it pretty good. Easy sex, we don't need to pick up the check, we don't have to open the door, we don't have any accountability. The age of chivalry is dead. But in the age of the Playboy philosophy, how can women regain their status?
Wow, that is a loaded question. I have a lot of feelings on it. So I'll start, when I don't know where to start, I'll start anywhere.
By the way, Ariel, that's a great way to begin with how women can reclaim their status, to say, I just have so many feelings. All the feelings are rushing into me. Please, go ahead.
Oh, all right. Well, the first thing I will say is what struck me about your sort of description of the sexual revolution. I would add, too, that the advent of the birth control pill played a huge role in sort of the double standard when it came to premarital sex for women versus men. And so I think there's a sort of something, I think the birth control pill needs to be given sort of its due course. When it comes to, in terms of feminism and chivalry, I think feminism in pushing sort of the sexual revolution of the female and more sexual openness has been detrimental to how men perceive their role in society. And so I think, like, you know, now the most common image of the woman is this 30-something-year-old woman. She's probably single. She's probably having trouble finding a man who's at her education level, because women are graduating from college at higher rates than men are.
Of course, they might be completely uneducated like everyone else who graduates from college.
Right, exactly.
But you make a good point. More women are graduating. Right. They're ostensibly more educated than men.
They are. And so the image of the proverbial forever single 30-something-year-old woman is becoming more commonplace now. And I think a lot of that has to do with, you know, being able to be completely independent also means that we haven't created a need for men as much. And, you know, both men and women need to feel needed by the opposite sex. That's ultimately, I think that's the thesis of women are from Venus and men are from Mars, that you need to create some sort of need for the opposite sex within your life. If women can hold their own doors, if they can, you know, do everything independently on their own, then men sort of feel useless. And in that sense, what is the point of chivalry, right? If we can do everything on our own, what's the point of needing men? And vice versa. You know, if men are becoming increasingly more independent and distant, and there's not really a need for women, then they too will not feel that they need a relationship. So
I will tell you though, Ariel, every night as I put my head on my pillow, my fiance, sweet little Lisa, leans over and she does say, Mac, I do not need you. I never need you. And yet the converse is not true. When she goes away for a week or two to New York, my life falls into shambles. I am living like a hog in sewage. The walls are falling down from my apartment. So there's a real double standard there.
Right. Oh, is there? Absolutely. So she doesn't need you. She's just performing her due diligence, or she's performing her charity.
Really. It's charity.
Yeah, you're her charity case.
Absolutely.
That's good. Yeah. So I guess that was a long and winded answer, but that's sort of, you know, I think how feminism has killed chivalry in a lot of ways. That would be sort of my argument, at least third wave feminism, and to some extent second wave feminism as well.
Sure, yeah, and you make a good point that the way out of it is to feel needed, to feel possessed, right. To feel in need of the other's support and supporting the other. Right. Your Eminence, obviously, your view, I assume you'll be speaking ex cathedra, will be infallible. Hugh Hefner was a charming guy, and it's hard not to like him. He was even apparently monogamous during his 3 marriages, so try to unpack that. But he does say he didn't cheat on his multiple wives. How did Hef go so wrong?
Well, that is a very loaded question, Michael, and I'm, of course, going to give my Catholic perspective on this. Now, I'm going to start with a quote that Hugh Hefner said in an interview in 1974. He said, quote, "At a very early age, I began questioning a lot of that religious foolishness about man's spirit and body being in conflict with God, primarily with the spirit of man, and the devil dwelling in the flesh." He also said, "Part of the reason that I am who I am is my Puritan roots run deep. My folks are Puritan. My folks are prohibitionists. There was no drinking in my home, no discussion of sex, and I think I saw the hurtful and hypocritical side of that from the very early on." Now, essentially what Hefner was operating under in his family life, who were Methodists, is a heresy in the Catholic Church known as Gnosticism, which completely and totally denies the flesh and says that the flesh is evil and all spiritual existence in relationship to God exists primarily in the spirit, primarily in the mind, and Descartes would expand this into a philosophy known as Cartesian philosophy. So essentially what that is it denies material in aiding in your salvation process. This goes back to John Calvin. John Calvin had sort of the similar thing that all human beings are totally depraved and
Total
matter.
depravity,
Yeah,
right.
total depravity, and matter is part of that. So essentially what you do, when that happens, is you essentially say that matter is essentially useless. Sex becomes just a utilitarian thing. It's primarily used for procreation. It's no longer about the bonding and man and wife coming together in multiple different ways, spiritually, physically, and partaking in the joy of that, which also produces a child. It rejects things like music, creating beauty, creating beautiful churches.
So you think that he's reacting just from one complete extreme all the way over to the other extreme?
Exactly, yes. They're two sides of the same oppressive coin.
And you know, Norm Macdonald made this point once. I think it was on some comedy album of his. He said, scientists say that men think about sex every 1.5 seconds, and that he knows that isn't true because, you know, he knows what he's thinking about, and he knows the precise amount of time that men think about sex, which is every once in a while. And there is this, it seems to be people say, like, either we're just completely sex obsessed, we have to just, everything has to be concupiscent and lustful and sexy, or we need to like all throw on potato sacks and whip ourselves whenever we have an impure thought. And obviously both of those are ridiculous.
Yes, of course. And, you know, I mean, unfortunately, you know, puritanical values have been a part of American culture for a very long time. I mean, you know,
Grandpappy's Knowles, you know, Four Guys on the Mayflower, they were pretty religiously zealous.
Yes, I mean, it got so extreme. I mean, we had, of course, like in the 1950s, I mean, in I Love Lucy, they couldn't use the word pregnant. You couldn't show a married couple.
I don't use it. On this show, you say enceinte. Thank you very much.
You couldn't use the word pregnant. I mean, there were lots of things that it goes to an extreme, and when you create that extreme, you create a whole entire another extreme, and it's out of balance. And unfortunately, part of me says that if we ever get it back, it will just go back to another puritanical extreme, and it's something that also infects the Catholic Church. There are people in sects like the SXPX where they talk about when they have sex with their spouse, it's like they just like they make sure all the clothes are on, and you can't like ever enjoy,
more than 2 minutes and it's a sin.
Yeah, exactly.
I know, I've read the books. You know, I'm just confused by the homonyms sex and sex. That's sex advice from Paul Bois. Ariel, did the Playboy Philosophy win? The magazine is in doldrums. Subscriptions peaked decades ago, but obviously there's this huge porn epidemic. Porn is a gigantic industry now. It goes beamed directly to your cell phone or your computer. Did Hefner win?
I think that the movement that Hefner was riding sort of the wave on, or he helped to forge the path for, that is still very much relevant. I think that technology has sort of transformed how information is transmitted. So, you know, if we look at what's happened to Playboy as a company, the reason that, you know, subscriptions have gone down probably has a lot to do with how you don't really need to pay for porn anymore. You don't need to pay for, you know, sexually explicit images.
Oh my God, I'm sorry. I got to make a phone call after this. Sorry. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
I think the internet is a horrible thing and a wonderful thing for a lot of different reasons. But, you know, my point being that the sexual revolution is something that Hefner, I think, himself helped to foster, and he's sort of become a cultural enigma. I think in a lot of ways, he did win. And I think the person that Hef was behind closed doors is probably very different than the person he was as sort of like you described earlier, this happy-go-lucky, very jovial person. Sounds like there was a lot more going on behind closed doors at his company and just internally within his own mind. I did want to point out there was something I came across in an article, I think it was a New York Times piece on him. They described how during the civil rights movement, he actually sent a black journalist by the name of Alex Haley to actually go interview the founder of the American Nazi Party because he wanted to explicitly make that neo-Nazi uncomfortable, and he wanted to expose his very bombastic racism. And I thought that was very interesting because that's a side of Hugh Hefner that we don't really hear as much about. But he was very forthright about having people come to the Playboy Mansion who are people of color, various different people of different backgrounds, and he made an explicit effort to do that.
There actually is a lot to be said for the guy. He was clearly more intellectual than people give him credit for. He was bolder on some political issues. And so, yeah, he actually did do some good things, even if he destroyed the country.
He did some good things, but he did do a lot of, I don't know, there was a memoir that came out from one of the Playboy bunnies. I think it was called Down the Rabbit Hole. That was pretty damning of Hugh as a person and sort of the lifestyle he lived. So like I said, I think there's a balancing act here of the person Hugh was, and behind closed doors, and who he was to the public.
As it is true of all of us, I'm sure. Zoe, are we just a bunch of prudes to be disrespecting the half?
Well, to that, I want to say something very, very serious, something very sobering. Do y'all think that Hugh Hefner is in his afterlife right now soliciting those 72 virgins to see if they can be in a centerfold for the jihadists who died in the name of Islam? Dude, there's a market there, man.
I was wondering, did he have a last-minute conversion to Islam? One would imagine that would be. That's just
he was
prudential.
a big donor. He was a big donor to the Democratic Party, so.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
He could just get up there and say, this is it, man. This is more of this. I get this for eternity. Damn. Nothing changes.
But can I get a show of hands of the fellas in here who like to see boobies?
I've heard they're nice. I've heard friends have told me they're nice. Yeah.
Boobs in the First Amendment.
That's right. I saw it on the news.
With his hand in the air. His hand is in the air. I'll bet you Ben and Jeremy are walking around with their hands and they say, yes, I like to see boobies. Now, here's the thing. I think it's proof of concept that men like to see boobies. You know why? Because naked women are valuable. There's value in naked women. Now, which means that I think it's more valuable than pay $3.99 to see a naked woman. You really want to show value in a naked woman? You flipping marry her. And that way you have access, not just the visual of the boobies, you got access to them to show that you're really valuable. I don't need you have
So marriage is a subscription.
A very expensive subscription.
A very lifelong subscription to boobs.
Well, Zoe, that's the Zoe revolution. We're going to have the Zoe philosophy to follow the Playboy philosophy, a very good one. Now, in related news, we have next week, the Congress will vote on the Pain-Capable Unborn Child Protection Act. This act came up in 2015. It was shot down. Now President Trump says it is a high priority for him to sign the bill, pass it into law, and protect and ban late-term abortions so that he can protect these unborn babies. Now, I think we're all probably happy about the content of the law, but it does raise a federalism question. Ariel, should we be passing these laws at a federal level, or should we leave it to the states?
That's a tough one for me because I'm someone who is adamantly pro-life, especially when it comes to issues like the partial birth abortion. I am in favor of passing this on a federal level, and I'll tell you why, because I don't think there's any murky gray area when it comes to sort of what a partial birth abortion is. I'm not going to go into detail and spare our viewers, but needless to say that it is something that is violent. It is gruesome.
Ariel, I'm sorry, because I was reading about this on Everyday Feminism. A partial birth abortion, that's when you just take out a slight little sac of cells that's a part of the mother through a completely clinical and normal procedure?
No, not at all.
That's not it?
No.
Oh,
in
wow.
fact, you can, yes, I know, horrible. Basically, if you are a woman, you give partial birth to the fetus or the baby. Let's call it baby for what it is. Yeah. You give birth to the baby. It's basically half out of your body, and at which point they are allowed to murder the child as it is halfway out of your body.
But if the mother doesn't want it, then it's not murder, right? That's how
right,
I think that's
right. Well,
what Aristotle talks about in the Ethics. I don't remember.
Right. Life is subjective, right? So it's whatever you decide life to be. That's the mystery of life, as Sandra Day O'Connor would say. It's so right. So what bothers me about it is I don't think there's any gray area when it comes to this. I think this was a good call, and I support Trump in supporting this. I think we're one step closer to creating an agenda that is much more hostile to abortion. I think what's happened, at least on the left end of the spectrum, it's sort of become a cause of celebration. And I think it's disgusting. I think it's morally reprehensible. And I would, I applaud Trump for supporting this ban. I just would like to see it actually happen, because in terms of defunding Planned Parenthood, that hasn't happened yet. We've yet to see that happen. And so, this is one step closer to showing that Trump is actually going to follow through in some of the things he said during his campaign.
He has to walk the walk. And one point on the word fetus, people on the left, they always try to draw a distinction between a fetus and a baby. Just as a matter of language, the word fetus means offspring. So a human fetus is human offspring. It comes from Latin. For some reason, they think it means, I don't know, like unicorn or something. But it does mean offspring. There's no difference between those words. So Democrats defeated this bill 2 years ago. Do the Democrats really believe that being the party of killing sentient, nascent human life is a winning campaign platform?
Well, convenience is popular, and when it comes to Democrats, that's what they're all about. A majority rule, and you get a majority by things being popular, and a popular thing is convenience. So of course it's going to do well, for lack of a better word, for them politically to be opposed to something like that. But if I may, can I answer a question? The question about whether this should be handled on a federal level or a state level?
Absolutely not. No way. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Please, listen. It's very simple. We have a supreme law of the land, and we all have to live under it, and we all have the right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. You can't make a decision on this on state level. This isn't even a question of it should be in court or not, because you're taking the court to deprive somebody of their right to live. That's not something that the court would be like, what? We're not going to do a hearing on that. That's ridiculous. So even on a state level, if the state decided to make it legal, then the federal government has the right to come in and say, actually, no, you're imposing on somebody's right to live. That is when the government is supposed to be involved. I think we're all limited government people here. Yeah, absolutely. But the objective of government is to protect our God-given rights. So should this be a question of being a state? No.
And the most fundamental right is the right to life. So if you don't have that, then you can't have a limited government.
Can't have the rest without them.
Right.
Paul, this is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yes.
But what about all those unborn babies who were aborted before they are capable of feeling pain? Do you think, as a matter of politics or morality, that conservatives should fight this abortion fight later on in second, third trimester where there is broad support for banning abortion? Or should conservatives be logically consistent and say we just need to outlaw abortion, overturn Roe v. Wade, human life is sacred from the beginning?
Yes. I certainly.
Oh, sorry, man.
I certainly believe. I'm an absolutist on this. I mean, if I were president, I would sign an executive order right away and just declare that Roe v. Wade was complete crap and it's gone.
That is the monarchist Paul Bois.
That is the monarchist in me. Yes. So just on a political level, obviously, if I'm in the Senate and they bring forth this bill, of course I'm going to sign onto it and support anything that protects human life. But I do think that the pro-life movement, and this, on the grassroots level, they have this voice. It's certainly not, on the political level. But absolutely, I am an absolutist. Just say it. Let's end it completely, totally. Abortion is evil. It is. It's the worst moral scourge to happen to this country since slavery, and we just need to voice it as much as possible every day until the public finally gets the message. The pro-life generation of my generation who's pro-life takes that very seriously. But the people, baby boomers, people who were around when abortion came onto the scene, they don't really have that intensity. But the younger generation really does, because we see its fallout.
That's true. And the boomers also gave us a terrible national debt that we'll never be able to pay, but that's neither here nor there. I'm sorry, Zoe, we cut you off.
No, I thought the question was for me, but it was His Eminence. Sorry about that.
Absolutely.
I wanted to add too.
Sorry, Ariel, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say as well that I think technology is on our side too here. In the 70s when, Roe v. Wade came about, they didn't have the technology that we have now. We can look in and see, elements of the child that we never would have been able to see prior. We can see fingernails, we can see hands, we can see toes. I mean, these are the sort of things that you just wouldn't this is something that it shouldn't be that we need to see it to believe it's life. That's not my point. But if we're trying to make people understand what we're fighting for, that is really a powerful weapon, and that's in our court, and that's in our favor. And I can already start to see people on the left sort of shaking in their boots as more and more science comes out about how sentient the baby is at a really, really young stage of development.
And it's amazing, too,
so
because Shapiro said, there was a great little viral video going around from his last speech where he said, the sentience doesn't matter. We shouldn't be able to kill someone in a coma. And there is this point that I think when we bring up all of the scientific advancements that let us see the unborn baby, I think, well, fingernails aren't the reason we have a right to life. Even a beating heart isn't the reason people have a pacemaker or whatever. But it is politically and emotionally very compelling. So should we rely on it for that reason?
I mean, it's tough because that's, like I said before, I don't want to, I shouldn't be saying that, oh, we're going to quantify life, but by what we can see. But maybe if it will help us to start the conversation, then I'm all for that. Because at this point, it's about reaching people in a way that we can show them, okay, this is what you're actually killing. Because now in certain states, you don't even need to have an ultrasound before you go through with an abortion. You don't even need to engage at all with the child you created before you decide to kill it. And so in my mind, that's horrible.
Yeah, of course, you don't want to see it before you kill the thing. That's kind of a bummer.
Right, absolutely not. You don't want to walk around. It's awful. Anyway, and I obviously have a ton of sympathy for the women that go through with this. I know it's not an easy choice. But when it comes down to having the conversation about when life begins and trying to make people understand what we're fighting for, I'm in favor of using technology to do that, as long as that's not our main line of argument. Yeah, our main line of argument should always be life begins at conception.
Yeah, and you might say it's a simple choice, but not an easy choice. That distinction that Ronald Reagan drew. He said there aren't easy answers, but there are simple answers. It is clear. It's just very difficult to accept the implication that human life is sacred from the beginning. Absolutely right. Okay, panel. Man, what a serious show. All I wanted to talk about was lingerie ladies and sex, but you've brought me back down to ideas and things like that. Thank you for being here, Ariel Davidson, His Eminence Paul Bois, and the one and only Zoe Rachel. Now it is time for the mailbag. Okay, now I think we should probably say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube here. We've got these great questions for the mailbag. We have, I'm accused of idolatry and Catholic idolatry at one of them, so we'll be answering that. But you cannot see it unless you go over and subscribe at thedailywire.com. I know you really want, but I'm sorry, it's not up to me. We thank everybody who's a current subscriber. They help us keep the lights on. For the rest of you, it's $10 a month, $100 a year. And what do you get? You get no ads on the website. That's very helpful. You get my show. You get the Andrew Klavan Show. You get the Ben Shapiro Show. Yeah. So what? But guys, come on. You get the Leftist Tears tumbler, the indestructible Leftist Tears tumbler made from crushed up and hardened, reinforced bits of Steven Crowder mugs. It is housing wonderful vintages this year. We have NFL players. We have George Clooney. We have Hillary Clinton. Every single one of her tweets fills up a full tumbler full of delicious tears. So go over there right now, dailywire.com. We'll be right back.